Welcome to Lesson 4, Leadership and Ethical Decision Making book study. The book we're going to be using is Dan York's The Strong Leader's Hand, Workbook 6 on Conduct. There's a quick little summary of the book. You can find this on the Lesson 4 homepage. Okay, the key themes and concepts: communication and our language, warning and correcting others, lack of teamwork, doing our best, and living the golden rule and doing the right thing. Communication and language. So in this, York teaches that leaders must speak clearly with purpose to reprimand, instruct, and encourage people, and the type of language we use matters. Cursing and foul language shows immaturity and it damages our image as leaders. Communication is more than about speaking. It involves body language, listening, and thinking. And it's also, as you know, one of the FAA's dirty dozen. Effective communication requires very good verbal and nonverbal skills. And the FAA estimates that only 30% of what we verbally communicate is understood. So that's why it's important to cover these other forms of communication, and that's why York hits them so hard. And it's also a good reason why in the FAA aviation world, we need to use things like written pats downs, maintenance logs, and work cards. And then Proverbs 18:21 says, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." And this is true for aviation as well. If you're not communicating effectively, we're going to miss stuff. You're going to compromise the airworthiness of an aircraft, and that ultimately could cost somebody their life. So you can't just be going through the motions. You have to communicate effectively and make sure that your conversations are bearing fruit. Warning and correcting. So institutional norms are hard to break. You hear all the time, like, that's the way we've always done it, but that doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. York says that leaders have to address and correct these issues so that an organization can resolve them, improve them, and prevent problems like bad conduct or attitudes from festering and hurting the organization and its personnel. So you have to remember there's a right and wrong way to do this. Thessalonians 5:11 says, "Therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing." Which means don't yell at somebody, don't denigrate them, call them names, or say, just because I said so. If they don't understand why they're doing something, the way they are is incorrect, you need to help them understand why it's incorrect and teach them a better way to do it. But, sometimes, no matter how much effort you put into teaching someone the right way to do things and the rules, York says that you have to make the hard decision and let them go because it could make things worse for the entire organization. But this should be a last resort. And you have to remember that God doesn't give up on us, so we shouldn't give up on others so easily. Warn them, correct them, and teach them. Showing compassion and understanding when correcting and rectifying institutional norms can go a long way to fixing problems. You may only need to do it with one person before they start spreading the word, and helping the organization overcome and adapt and actually thrive. The lack of teamwork. York says that by helping and serving those we lead, we create a more pleasant, collaborative work environment that builds trust and loyalty within the organization. And by helping and serving, as York says, we can tackle, the human factors issue of lack of teamwork. The lack of teamwork is detrimental to aviation safety. So when we fail to work as a team to reach our agreed upon goal, we're doomed to failure. We're never going to get there, And that type of behavior creates cliques and infighting and selfishness, which you can't have. Because the goal is no longer about putting out the best aircraft. It's about seeking personal glory and blaming others for mistakes and making yourself look good. And that's not how God expects leaders or Christians to behave. 1 Peter 4:10 says, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. We all have something to contribute, and by working as a team, everyone benefits. We glorify God. So we have to be sure to work together and glorify God. So doing our best means being disciplined, present, and qualified. Discipline could be tied to the human factor of complacency. Being present could be a lack of awareness, not being present, and not being qualified, could be a lack of knowledge. But they're all kind of related to a lack of knowledge in one way or another. Because if you're not disciplined, you won't strive to try and learn and retain new knowledge. If you're not present, you're not going to be aware of what someone's trying to teach you. And if you're not qualified, then you don't have the knowledge to do your job safely and effectively. And York says that a strong leader possesses all of these qualities and instills them in their subordinates. Proverbs 18:15 says, "The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out." So we have to seek out knowledge. We have to seek out mentors to train us. And then we have to share that knowledge with others so that we can help them get better too. And society benefits as a whole, and certainly the aircraft industry does when we share knowledge. We create better AMTs, better pilots, better ground crew, and we make aircraft safer and more airworthy, and thereby making air travel safer. And then living the golden rule and doing the right thing. Everyone has heard the golden rule, right? And Matthew 7:12 says, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." So we said you probably heard this verse or some variation of it. And York says that living the golden rule exemplifies good conduct, which is what we expect from a Christian leader. Living and leading the golden rule and doing things right can affect, right, human factors of lack of teamwork, lack of assertiveness, lack of awareness, complacency. And that's probably the biggest one, right? Because if you're doing the right thing all the time, you're not going to be complacent. And from an aviation perspective, when we put ourselves above others, we do everything to the best of our abilities, right? Following the rules, procedures, ensuring that our subordinates and co-workers do the same, and creating the most airworthy and safest aircraft we can. Kind of like stewardship of this aircraft. It's no coincidence. The very first thing in the book York covers is living the golden rule and doing the right thing. And you would expect a restaurateur, a car dealer, a hotel to give you the best possible service. And you should do that for everyone who flies on an aircraft that you work on. You give them the best every day, and you avoid the temptations of complacency, and you put forth your best effort all day long, every day, and you ensure safeness of everyone. So in the conclusion here, York's Strong Leader Handbook, Work 6, Conduct, shows how someone's behavior is tied to their ethical decision making and their leadership capabilities. He integrates biblical principles into the text that allows us to see how God wants us to lead. And by looking at the text through an aviation lens, we can see how the principles can be applied to deal with human factors. Strong leadership requires intentional action, effective communication, compassion, commitment to teamwork, and an ethos of excellence that eschews selfishness and complacency. And it requires living the golden rule every day and to set a Christ-like example for others to follow. And that's what we need to do. Set a Christ-like example for others to follow. And that's the whole point of York's book as a leader. That's what we do. So that's it. All these references, everything you can find on the Lesson 4 homepage. Good luck. I hope you enjoy the class, and see you again soon.